Trump set the mood for the markets as soon as he landed here in Kuala Lumpur. Stocks rallying in Asia on signs the U.S. and China have hammered out a trade deal. And more signs that it was a win-win on optics for both sides. Look at the smile on the face of Chinese Vice Premier He Feng after 2 days of meetings with his U.S. counterpart. Live from Kuala Lumpur, this is Insight with Haslinda Amin, where we dive deeper into the stories that matter with crucial context and sharp analysis.
We've created a framework for the two leaders to discuss on Thursday in Korea.
The deal that revolves around Chinese purchases of U.S. soybeans and the flow of critical minerals now needs to be finalized by Presidents Xi and Trump when they meet in South Korea. Meanwhile, South Korea's president tells us that talks with the U.S. on a $350 billion investment plan remain stuck on all major details.
미국의 이익을 극대화하고 싶겠지만
The US will of course try to maximize its interests, but it must not be to the extent that causes catastrophic consequences for South Korea.
Also ahead, we speak to the MD of Malaysian sovereign fund, Khazanah about the trade deal struck with the US on trade and critical minerals. And we discuss the implications of the trade and geopolitical headlines on the energy markets with IEA Executive Director Fateh Birol. Our top story today, a major breakthrough in trade talks between the U.S. and China. Top negotiators from both countries say they've reached terms on a range of contentious points, setting the stage for Presidents Trump and Xi to finalize a deal during the expected meeting later this week. The development has triggered a rally in Asian shares as well as oil and copper. Optimism was further buoyed by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying Trump's threat of an additional 100% tariffs on Chinese goods is now effectively off the table.
President Trump gave me a great deal of negotiating leverage with the threat of the 100% tariffs on November 1st, and I believe we've reached a very substantial framework that will avoid that and allow us to discuss many other things with the Chinese.
President Trump is now en route to Japan following his Malaysia visit. He is expected to meet with the Japanese emperor later Monday and the country's newly elected Prime Minister Takaichi on Tuesday. For more, let's bring in our Chief North Asia correspondent, Stephen Angle, at the Akasaka Palace in Tokyo. And Steve, we know that President Trump said he's close to a deal with Chinese counterpart as he shifts focus to Japan next. What's on the ground?
Well, obviously, the backdrop of the visit here to Tokyo for a couple of days, including likely to the Akasaka Palace behind me, which serves as the state guest house and essentially where traditionally the prime minister would meet visiting heads of state like Donald Trump, as was the case 6 years ago when we were also right here in front of the palace gates in May of 2019 when Donald Trump came and met with Shinzo Abe, then prime minister. So the backdrop, obviously, are the developments that happened that were hammered out between the United States and China in what would be the fifth round of trade talks ahead of this eventual meeting in a couple of days in South Korea between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, where they can give their stamp of approval or at least hammer out even further the fine details of what has been said to be a framework agreement on critical issues, including those export controls from both sides, including including rare earths from China. Also, the fentanyl issue. Will that 20% added tariff by the Trump administration on China because of the fentanyl issue be wiped away because of that? And also, of course, these shipping levies that both nations have imposed on each other's ships. Those likely have been agreed to be removed as well. So there's a lot of contentious issues, no doubt. This doesn't necessarily represent a panacea in the U.S.-China relationship, but it does go a long way to at least give the optics of deliverables for both Xi Jinping and Donald Trump come Thursday on the sidelines of APEC. So stay tuned to that one. Turning the attention to Japan, I think this is almost as equally a interesting dynamic. Then Trump-Xi is going to be Trump and Takaichi-san, the new prime minister, the first female prime minister, also said to be harboring more nationalistic sentiment. She wants to boost the defense spending here in Japan. She wants to accelerate the timetable to 2% of GDP by a couple of years. So that would be music to Donald Trump's ears. He wants to see the allies in this part of the world, South Korea and Japan, pick up bigger tab of the defense spending. Is it enough, though? But again, they seem to have hit it off in their initial phone call. She is a protege of Shinzo Abe. Donald Trump has all along said he admired Shinzo Abe. So that will be a very interesting dynamic to watch, that personal building. Can Takaichi-san make any move to renegotiate? I'm not saying she will, but that trade deal that was struck in July and then essentially formalized in September, that reduces and basically formalizes the Trump tariff on Japan at 15% in exchange for Japan contributing to a fund to invest in the United States to the tune of $550 billion US dollars. So a lot to talk about there, a lot to talk about defense spending and just building the personal relationship between what has been one of the most longstanding allies of America here in the Asia Pacific, and that's Japan.
And Steve, speaking of relationships, we know Trump has sort of a special relationship with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. There is a possibility they may meet.
Yeah, I've always thought that it would be a very distinct possibility. Donald Trump, of course, met Kim Jong-un 3 times in his first term, and I was at 2 of them in, of course, Singapore, Hanoi, and then at the Panmunjom Peace Village, where Donald Trump became the first U.S. president to take a step into North Korea. I'm not sure that's going to be repeated. It possibly could. We're getting reports from domestic media in South Korea that the North Koreans are sprucing up the highway from Pyongyang to the border regions. They're cleaning up areas of the North Korean side of the Peace Village, giving indications that perhaps they are readying for the possibility of those 2 leaders meeting at some point, probably after the APEC summit down in the south in Gyeongju. We're also hearing the foreign minister of North Korea heading to Russia, perhaps as well as a signal that they're going to be comparing notes on how to deal with Donald Trump.
Steve, thank you so much for that. Our Chief North Asia correspondent Stephen Angle at the Akasaka Palace in Tokyo. Now, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has told Bloomberg that he welcomes U.S. efforts to hold proactive dialogue with North Korea. Lee previously said that if Trump acts as a peacemaker, he will assist the president by being a pacemaker.
President Trump's efforts to engage North Korea in dialogue, cooperation, and bilateral relations can greatly help better relations and confidence building and establishing peace between the 2 Koreas.
We also spoke to Lee about the progress of trade talks with Washington, including his government's $350 billion U.S. investment pledge.
한미 간의 협상은 이제 안보 분야.
The negotiations between Korea and the United States are proceeding in 2 areas of security and economics simultaneously. Negotiations in the field of security issues are going very well, but negotiations in the area of economics, especially trade, have reached a preliminary agreement, and we're in the process of hashing out the details. The discussion is ongoing and there are some differences of opinion, but the delay does not necessarily mean that this is a failure. We already have a comprehensive agreement, and we're currently working on the details. So I would appreciate your patience.
일본과의 협상에 있어서는 좀
When it comes to Japan's deal, there have been some divergent interpretations. Is South Korea trying to make it more specific than Japan's? And if that's the case, could that become more burdensome for Korea later on?
대한민국은 일본이 아닙니다.
Korea is not Japan. I do not fully know what deal the US and Japan have struck, but from our point of view, we have our own circumstances, and we will reach a rational result that suits us. Of course, the example of Japan or Europe could be a base that we can refer to, but in the end, we must find a way which takes into account Korea's circumstances, that is acceptable to Korea, and also helps the United States in its manufacturing renaissance. As we search for a mutually beneficial path, there will be differences as well as alignment of opinions.
접점을 맞추는 데 있어서는
In finding common ground, could the size of the US investment fund become smaller?
투자의 방식,
The method of investment, the amount of investment, the timeline, and how we will share the losses and divide the dividends, all of these remain sticking points. The US will of course try to maximize its interests, but it must not be to the extent that causes catastrophic consequences for South Korea. The United States is the leading country in the world when it comes to democracy and rationality. South Korea is an ally and friend of the United States, so we believe that we will be able to reach a rational result that is acceptable to all sides, and this is what has to be done.
이번 APEC이 또 부각된
A highlight of the APEC summit is the upcoming meeting between Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping. How important is this dialogue for South Korea?
한국은 지금 공급망을 둘러싸고
When it comes to the supply chain, the world is divided into two blocks facing off each other, one led by the United States and one by China. Korea is situated both geographically and economically between these two. We are situated in between two grinding stones. It's a situation akin to having both arms pulled by China and the United States. This is both a challenge and an opportunity. We cherish our baseline policy emphasizing the Korea-US alliance and Korea-US-Japan trilateral cooperation. At the same time, we do not seek to sever ties or pursue excessive confrontation with China or socialist nations. Korea will continue to cherish and emphasize its alliance with the United States, and at the same time manage its relationship with China.
And that was South Korean President Lee Jae-myung speaking to our very own Sherry An. Now, staying with trade, and President Trump is en route from Malaysia to Japan today with a series of already announced access to critical minerals and opening up markets for U.S. agricultural goods were key focuses in the agreements with Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Market benchmarks across Southeast Asia getting a lift today on the new PAGs. Now, let's focus in on Malaysia's deal with our guest, Amirul, Feisal, Zahir, Managing Director of Malaysia's Sovereign Wealth Fund, Khazanah Nasional. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Trade has been driving sentiment in the market. I'm looking at how risk-on it is today. We have Japan, Korea up 2%. As a whole, Asia up about 1.5%. I mean, this is perhaps a reaction to how close the U.S. and China could be in terms of their trade deal.
Well, actually, you're right. I think there's a huge uplift. I think it's almost like a burden lifted up everyone's shoulders, right? Because this overhang has been there. The uncertainty of what's happening on trade with regarding to U.S. and China has impacted markets everywhere. We've had one stability here, at least in Malaysia, in coming up with an agreement, but we still need to understand what's going to happen between China and the U.S.
So it's too early? Are these investors jumping the gun?
The 100% tariff, if that's off the table, I think that's actually a positive. But where the markets settle, that's something we'd really like to see.
So it is not enough for you yet, for you to rethink or, I suppose, revise your strategy going forward. I understand you're a long-term investor, but have assumptions changed, basically?
I think assumptions have changed. First of all, I think what you've heard over the weekend is actually it's an uncertainty remove, but there's still a bit more uncertainty because we have to look at the differential of tariffs between trading nations and trading blocs. And right now, where is it, right? So that's something that we're still looking at before we actually chart the longer term investments.
Positive signs for Malaysia as well. We have the US and Malaysia having a trade deal, also a deal on rare earths. How are you reading into that? Because, I mean, you're 60% invested in the domestic market.
Yes. Well, rare earth is actually, it's very interesting, but we actually don't look at just rare earth on its own. It's kind of like a means to an end rather than an end on its own. So we have to look at the whole ecosystem. Now, we've been looking at the semiconductor sector in Malaysia, and there's one element which is actually quite strong at, which is basically your power management chips, your mature nodes. And having an ecosystem that looks at that, we have a healthy auto sector, having magnets, having RE to actually supply that. That's the ecosystem we're trying to build, rather than just looking at just rare earths alone.
So how does that translate to in terms of how you might deploy your capital to invest in the sector?
Well, first of all, I think it's a global business. The processing plant or the midstream of that sector is a huge amount of investment that you can't just do it on its own. It has to look at the whole ecosystem. So what we're trying to do is trying to build that ecosystem and collaborate with anyone that can actually provide both the expertise as well as the integration.
Let's talk about the collaboration, because it's out there. Like Khazanah is looking for partners in China, for example. Are you in talks? Where are you with that? And what areas are you looking at?
We're still focused on the ecosystem at the moment, because I'll tell you why. We had an allocation to verify the amount of reserves that we have. And some of the reserves are actually in permanent forest reserves. So we have to look at the the environmental impact. We have to look at the regulatory framework. Now, even if that's the case, again, it's really building the whole ecosystem. And we need to understand which party is actually willing to actually provide more than just an extraction of RE carbonates.
In the end, though, it has to translate into growth and jobs in Malaysia. What assumptions are you making? Are there numbers that you have arrived at?
How
do you quantify how big this industry could be and the impact it could have?
Right. First of all, we see it as additive to the current ecosystem. So that has an immediate impact. But when you look at the RE sector on its own, I don't think it's the same as oil and gas. And the reason why is because once you mine the minerals, like supermagnets, for example, it has a long life. And therefore, what needs to be is we have to look at technology for recycling of the used batteries and EVs or even turbines. So that's something we look, but I think when we look at that, it's not necessarily the industry, it's being able to be first to come up with that ecosystem that actually harnesses the natural resources that we have.
Okay, so easing tensions when it comes to trade. We're also seeing easing tensions in the space of rare earths. How are you deploying capital right now in an environment where the Fed is expected to ease further?
Well, first of all, it's not so easy. Well, there's one benefit that we have is when the Fed starts easing, and whether it's 2 this year and 1 next year, etc., what we're finding is there's a lot of liquidity coming to Asia in the market. Now, I know when you actually look at the emerging markets, it's had a healthy growth year to date. Unfortunately for us, we're 60% exposed to Malaysia. Malaysia hasn't been that great. Having said that, I think we're still diversifying our returns, looking at public markets, redeploying it in the global markets, making sure that we have access to Japan, access to the Europe market as well as the US, and have that diversity, because it's not just a case of one market. It's still going to be volatile, and therefore we're going to make sure that it's diversified. And likewise, private equity. I know there's a bit of a delay in terms of people getting access, but that actually provides some opportunities in certain markets. For example, whether it's in Southeast Asia or even in India, where we actually look at, perhaps pricing is actually more reasonable nowadays.
Exposure to the private market is about 12% right now. Is there a chance that you may raise that exposure?
We're looking at it. I think as prices have come off a bit, I think we're looking at opportunities, and we'll deploy when it's required.
What are you most excited about in the private space? You're not in private credit.
No. We're not in private credit.
And no plans to be.
We have to diversify the asset base. It takes us a bit longer in order to have that additional tool, so to speak, in our arsenal. And we're working on that. I'm not saying that we're not going to be there, but we're working on that. Now, As far as the sectors, like for example in Southeast Asia, there are certain areas like whether it's healthcare or fintech, those are the ones that can still benefit from the overall growth in this region. And those are the areas that we would be looking at.
And of course, in terms of AI technology, that's still huge, that's still the theme. Of course, talk of an AI bubble as well. How are you weighing all of that?
AI, okay. First of all, we do think that AI will be pervasive. When you think about it, it'll be used in AI manufacturing and how cars are used. So it's quite pervasive. I think the question here is in terms of the price point and whether it's going to be a bit, like you said, a bit too frothy. Now, the potential is huge. When you look at the semiconductor sector, right, not just AI software, but the semiconductor sector, we anticipate it's going to grow by about 9% per annum by the end of the decade. There's still the storage required for that, and that's going to be double that even. So these are the areas where we can actually tap on when it comes to potential for investment opportunities as well as yields.
Would you be looking at the Chinese market? I mean, now that trade tensions are easing, that could potentially be the market to be in right now.
Well, they have actually performed, whether it's H market, so they have actually done quite well year to date. And we are exposed to that. And I think what we would like to see, and this is a long-term investor, I think when you look at China, for example, there's a huge amount of potential while they still have to grapple with what to do with this capacity given the tariff. But remember, their consumption for GDP is actually still at 40%. I know everyone's hopeful for it to go higher, it takes time, but there's more potential for that, there's more potential for innovation. And I think what we're looking at is where to look at opportunities perhaps around AI or the picks and shovels around it.
The biggest risk in the market right now?
Biggest risk?
Yes.
More uncertainty because of trade and more geopolitics. So.
And how are you hedging? What's the best way to hedge?
Is to diversify across all asset classes. I think that's something that we are doing, and we can make some tactical shifts as we go along.
I know you're not exposed to private credit. I'm just wondering, though, how are you reading into those concerns, those cockroaches? That could be spillover effect, the ripple effects to the rest of the market.
Yes. Well, what is interesting is rates, we believe, because of inflation, is going to be there. Actually, it's going to be a real price to risk rather than, I would say, higher for longer. Now, for private credit, I think because of the past, banks have been fairly conservative, and cost of capital for banks is pretty high. And therefore, it's not so easy to access it, whether it's your mid-tier companies or SME. Banks tend to be more risk averse, and this has caused a mushrooming of private credit. And I think that's why I think we are looking at that as a space going forward, but it will take a bit of time.
All right, Faisal, always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. Amirul, Feisal, Zahir, MD of Khazanah Nasional. Now, still ahead this hour, and of course, we're coming to you from Kuala Lumpur. CIMB Group CEO Novan Amirudin will be joining us exclusively here at the Bloomberg Business Summit in KL. We'll talk about Malaysia's trade deal and the growing risks in global credit. Keep it here with us. This is Welcome back. We're coming to you live from Kuala Lumpur, where the whole world is here on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Of course, we had Brazilian President Lula also in attendance, and we're hearing from him. You see him on the screen right now, live, coming to you from KL. President Lula saying that there will be definitive solutions with the U.S. within a few days. He's had conversations with President Trump, as you can imagine. He said that Trump said he intends to make a good deal with Brazil, and that negotiations will continue in Washington next week. Lula says that the meeting with Trump was surprisingly good. And of course, we heard from President Trump himself saying that they have a good relationship. That may just mean that tariffs for Brazil may be headed lower. Well, still to come, my conversation with Malaysian Trade Minister Zafrul Aziz ahead of the rare earths and critical minerals deal with the U.S. announced on Sunday. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. You're watching Inside, coming to you live from Kuala Lumpur on the sidelines of the ASEAN Leaders Summit. Now, President Trump has signed a trade deal and critical minerals pact with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. The U.S. is looking to boost trade in the region and counter China's tightening access to rare earths. Ahead of that deal, we spoke with Malaysia's Trade Minister, Zafrul Aziz.
So we will be, again, engaging and discussing on how we need to address some of these supply chain disruptions in this case. I think for ASEAN, engagement with China is key. There are export restrictions, but there are different forms of restriction. If you go into the details and you go to the tariff lines, those, I think, are more about economic security rather than anything else.
So is it a worrying trend that China is adopting?
It is a worrying trend, definitely. It's not just China adopting. US is also adopting, and some other countries are also having to adopt this. So for Malaysia, we need to address their concerns. That's why, for example, under the Strategic Trade Act, we have invoked Section 2, where we will make certain enforcements on products that are deemed sensitive by certain blocks or certain countries.
We know from the Prime Minister's budget that Malaysia is interested in being a global player, or rather a player in the global rare earth supply chain. I'm just wondering, where are you with that, and what's his thinking? What's the goal, and what's the timeline?
Yeah. For us, as we have banned the export of critical minerals or rare earth, we want to develop our midstream and downstream, and we are inviting any players. Of course, we have one here today, an Australian player, but we all know that one or two other countries are also quite interested. And
like the US?
US and China, but do they have the technology is one thing, but they do want to ensure, again, because of the various restrictions that may happen, they want to make sure that the supply chain security and the resiliency of that supply chain for these critical minerals is not affected. So for Malaysia, we are inviting those players who want to be part of that supply chain to build their supply chain in Malaysia as much as possible. So this is where we are going to continue to engage companies from China, Japan, Korea, US, of course, to see how they can participate in that ecosystem.
So you're currently in several talks?
In several talks, yes, but it's not so easy because we also need to look at how do we get domestic companies to participate as well. We would like to see that spillover happening. We want to see whoever that comes in obviously needs to ensure that there is positive spillover to Malaysia.
And that was Malaysian Trade Minister Zafrul Aziz at the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit. Well, our next guest runs Malaysia's second largest lender. Joining us exclusively, Novan Amirudin, CEO of CIMB Group. Novan, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Coming out of Malaysia, it does seem like there's a feel-good factor. Risk is on. When you take a look at the markets, pretty much, green across the board. Is this a chance for ASEAN markets to rebound? There have been a withdrawal of about $900 million just this month alone.
Well, absolutely. I think we're looking at an extremely exciting period. What investors do not like is uncertainty. And with all the various announcements and deals being announced, part of that uncertainty is being removed. I mean, if you think about it, over the last, a couple of years, there is a mismatch between the macroeconomics of ASEAN, which doesn't fully flow into the capital markets. I mean, we all know about the positives of the ASEAN macro. Young, dynamic population, 700 million population, twice the size of the United States. GDP is growing at twice the size. We as CIMB, one of the largest banking groups in ASEAN, we are involved actively in all those discussions with our clients. However, it hasn't fully flown into the capital markets. Although ASEAN GDP is 15% of the United States, on the equity markets basis, it's only 5%. ASEAN capital markets is valued at 14-15 times price to earnings ratio versus the 24-25 times in the US. So clearly, there's not enough ASEAN stories being told. There's a lot of capital chasing few stories in the developed markets. I really do think, with the reduction in uncertainties, with investors, looking for better returns and also to diversify their returns into emerging markets, now is the time for ASEAN.
The question is how quickly that can happen. You talk about how ASEAN stocks are still cheap, right? But when you take a look at how they've done, I think year to date, 10% versus emerging markets as a whole at about 24%. How quickly can they bridge that gap?
It's an excellent question, and to be fair, investors are looking for returns, and what ASEAN needs to deliver is corporate earnings. To deliver corporate earnings, ASEAN corporates need to be resilient. ASEAN corporates need to start to innovate and to increase investments. That way we can deliver corporate earnings, which will then allow the funds to basically flow into ASEAN. I'm extremely optimistic. If we look at the stability within ASEAN, ASEAN is relatively stable, a peaceful region. We're seeing various governments, putting in all sorts of policies to drive growth. We've seen Malaysia through, the budget a couple of weeks ago. Very much about driving growth, very much about fiscal consolidation, very much about redistributing wealth, to ensure that we get the multiplier effect. We've seen the side in Indonesia, where they are injecting more liquidity into the system to push growth. Thailand also similar. All these trickle down into the corporate space, which then trickles down into SME as well as consumers. As there'll be more spending, more confidence, the multiplier effect is being generated. I am confident. I'm very confident. That this will then drive corporate earnings, which will then allow the funds, to come to ASEAN.
What does it specifically mean for Malaysia? Where do you see Malaysian stocks in 12 months? Where do you see the ringgit? In my conversation with the second finance minister, he talked about how he expects continued strength in the ringgit, sub 4 perhaps.
Well, we do believe in the continued strength of the ringgit, and it's because if you look at the budget itself and you look at what the government has been doing, it's everything to increase confidence and to drive demand for the ringgit. If you look at the budget, I would summarize the budget into 3 things. Number 1, revenue is a lot sharper, it's a lot more broader base, and there is a system of e-invoicing to ensure that we can get sharper collection of revenues. When you look at expenditure, there's fiscal consolidation, but the savings from fiscal consolidation is going into redistribution of wealth to ensure we benefit from the multiplier effect. And the redistribution of wealth is done via a system. It's not something sporadic. It's a system to make sure that it's scalable and we can leverage off the data to make sure it's done properly. And if you look at development expenditure, it's not just the government putting in the development, it's also the government-linked investment companies via Gear Up. So it's the government together with the GLICs putting in all those investments into development expenditure. You put all those together, Haslinda, if you put all those together, that will be enough to drive confidence in the economy. It will increase foreign investments into the country, and that will then, strengthen the ringgit.
Will that trickle down to loan growth? Because it's been quite lackluster, right? When you take a look at your loan growth, it's at about, 4%? The target is 5 to 7. Where are we with that? When will you get to target?
Well, with regards to targets and with regards to loan growth, when it comes to corporate lending especially, it's all about timing. It's all about timing. It's not like consumer or commercial lending where, loan growths according to a certain multiplier effect. Corporate is all about timing. We at CIMB, we are one of the largest banking groups in the region. We are in the middle of a lot of conversations with foreign investments that are coming in. Foreign investments that come in will then need to lever up and that will drive loan growth. Once the investments are in, loan is there, construction needs to happen, and you'll have a lot of local construction companies from the large ones down to the SMEs, the vendors.
Timeline, right? If your target is 5 to 7%, might that happen in the next 24 months?
I'm confident it will happen within the 24 months. I mean, at the end of the day, when we talk about, all this trickle-down effect, you start with foreign investments coming in, you then have leverage, you then have construction, it then takes 24 to 36 months to construct, and then you have employment, and then you have people spending. It's all it's all a very nice multiplier effect.
How are you then positioning for growth? And how do you capitalize the feel-good factor that's building right now?
So from CIMB's perspective, it's not just about the feel-good factor. We want to build a sustainable business for our stakeholders. And a sustainable business is something that grows all the time. It doesn't rely on, one particular feel-good factor. But in order to build a sustainable business, we need to make sure we are inclusive, that we cover all customer segments.
What does that mean necessarily in terms of policies and how you expand the business?
Well, for CIMB, we cover all customer segments, from the underserved to the high net worths, from the SMEs to the large corporates.
And the biggest growth area would be?
It will be broad-based throughout. And that's the beauty of the CIMB business. It's diversified, and because it's diversified, it gets to build a sustainable business. Another key thing that drives the CIMB business is the fact that we have both traditional bank as well as digital bank and fintech solutions. We have the traditional bank that banks on the traditional businesses, but we also have the fintech and the digital sites that bank the growth areas, the underserved. That is a very unique combination that CIMB hold, and that will allow us to drive a broader, more sustainable growth. So if I were to summarize 3 things for CIMB Group, is building a sustainable revenue base for our stakeholders, is ensuring that we cover every customer segment, so therefore everybody wins. And we are a technology company. We embrace technology because technology and digital is the most efficient way for us to cover a wider base of customers.
Banks are currently in focus because of the cockroaches in the US, the private credit that seem to be bubbling over. Your thoughts on that space? Is there reason to be concerned?
Not really concerned. I feel that all of us have a role to play in the wider financing ecosystem. And that role depends on what your risk appetite is, which then translates into returns. Private credit, for example, or even VC funding, they have a very specific role to play in certain parts of the business. The banks like CIMB Group, where we have a traditional bank and digital banks and fintech, we have our own role to play within the ecosystem. So I see it as actually quite complementary between what you call the disruptors or the fintechs together with the traditional banks. In fact, CIMB Group is a traditional bank plus a digital bank and fintech. We basically do both. So I actually see it as complements rather than something to be concerned about.
One of the areas that investors are focused on is, of course, where the Fed goes from here. How closely are you watching that, and how might that impact sentiment here in Malaysia?
Well, it's very important because what happens in Fed or the developed world will then influence how money flows, right, from the developed markets into the emerging markets. I think based on all the narrative that is out there, there is a narrative towards rates trending down. Naturally, when rates trend down in the developed markets, funds will need to look for other returns in the emerging markets. They will then move to the emerging markets, part of it. They want to diversify investments. And, I'm very, very confident that a lot of that will come to ASEAN.
And the assumptions that you're making about the Fed moves, some say 2, some say more, the next move could be 25, some even say it could be 50.
You know what, we don't spend too much time trying to assume how much rates will move in either way. What's most important is we are always aware of where the wind is blowing, whether the rates are trending up or down, and we make sure that we're always nimble to make sure that we can adjust our business strategies accordingly.
But what do you view as the biggest risk for your business right now? If it's not the Fed, and if trade tensions are easing, what's keeping you awake at night?
Well, at the end of the day, risk is everywhere. Our business of banking is all about embracing risk. We embrace risk every day. What's most important is we take calculated risk and we know how to mitigate the risk. So we are always looking at all the various risk parameters, and we basically adjust our business that way.
It is a competitive space. You're the number 2 player. How are you positioning to perhaps get closer to the top?
To me, the most important thing, and this is really from CIMB Group's perspective, the most important thing is how we're banking our customers, how our customers feel about us. It's less about whether we're the number 1 player, number 2 player, or even the number 5 player in Southeast Asia. But the most important thing is how we bank our customers. Do our customers see us, as playing a useful role in their lives?
But in the next next 12 to 24 months, how would you gauge success? How would you gauge that you've done better than your competitors? Surely there are benchmarks that you would like to meet.
Well, the success is when CIMB Group becomes top of mind for customers throughout ASEAN. So whenever anyone, whether you're a large corporate, SME or consumer, or even the underserved, when you're thinking about your banking needs, you think about CIMB. To me, that is the most important. When that happens, naturally then, we would see our returns increase, we would see share price appreciation, we would see all the necessary statistics that a bank would track. But nothing is more important than making sure that our customers see us as
It is
important.
about revenue, it is about margins, it is a business in the end. What are the targets and when do you think you'll achieve them?
We will achieve them when we are top of mind from our customers' perspective. I would like to do it right now. I mean, our job, our duty every day is to make sure that from our customers' perspective, they spend less time on banking and more time on living. If CIMB get to play that role and we are invisible in our customers' lives, but we're playing a very important role in their daily lives, that is when we basically achieve our purpose.
Novan, let's take a macro perspective and take a look at the Malaysian economy. What growth rate is sustainable going forward?
Well, we've seen a lot of forecasts out there. The government in announcing the budget also mentioned its forecasts. I think what's most important is, the current policies that are being put in place is to make sure that the economy is resilient and to make sure that the growth is sustainable. So what is being announced by the government, we're very confident in something that's sustainable. Because of the policies that are put in place itself, it ensures that the economy is resilient. It's not relying on any one-off silver bullets. It's actually proper discipline, sharper collection of revenues, fiscal consolidation, which then gets redistributed to the wider society, which creates a multiplier effect, and the development, the development expenditure that the country is doing with the GLICs. All this put together, in our view, is here to build a resilient and sustainable economy for Malaysia.
All right, Novan, good to have you with us. Thanks so much for that. Novan Amirudin, CEO of CIMB Group. Plenty more ahead. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. We're coming to you live from Kuala Lumpur. We're on the sidelines of the ASEAN Leaders Summit. You're seeing live pictures here from KL. You're looking at Brazilian President Lula. He did have a meeting with President Trump. He talked about how he is expecting a definitive solution of bilateral disputes within days. That will happen within days, he says. And that particular meeting with Trump was particularly good. He said negotiations will take place in Washington next week and that U.S. sanctions taken against Brazil were pretty much unacceptable. Lula saying negotiators will meet in D.C. next week and that the meeting with Trump was surprisingly good. Now, speaking of Brazil, the plane maker Embraer is warning that it may see order cancellations and delays if President Trump's punitive tariffs are implemented. CEO Francisco Gomes Neto told us that the levies could add $2 million to the cost of each aircraft.
With this additional cost, our customers, they might decide to delay to receive the aircraft they have ordered to us and not to buy new ones. This will be bad for them. This will delay the renewal of the fleets. It will be bad for us and for the U.S. industry, because if we make fewer aircraft, we buy fewer equipment from the U.S. That's why the zero tariff is important, not only for the cost we pay for the parts we sell to the U.S., for our own operations there, but the tariff the customers are paying when they get our aircraft.
So there is a real possibility that orders can be delayed or cancelled, and what would that mean for Embraer? I mean, how are you looking at your numbers?
So far, we are okay. We don't see any issue. We don't have any cancellation at this point of time. But midterm, this might happen. That's why we have been working to convince everyone that the restoration of the zero tariff will be beneficial for everyone, for Brazil, for U.S., for Embraer.
Francisco, we know that Embraer has been looking at blunting the impact of tariffs by investing in the U.S. The number out there is $1 billion. Can you shed some light on whether that commitment is still intact?
Well, let me tell you first about our business with the U.S. I mean, we are growing a lot. We have now over $31 billion in backlog of new orders. So our plan for the next 5 years, only 5 years, is to buy $21 billion from U.S. suppliers. And our plan in the same period is to export from Brazil $13 billion. So this means an $8 billion surplus for the U.S. So it's a great deal for U.S. as well. In parallel, we are investing almost $500 million in a new MRO center in Dallas that we had the groundbreaking ceremony last week. I was there. And to expand our operations in Melbourne, Florida. And I mean, we have been working with the U.S. Air Force to introduce our KC-390, the multi-mission lifter. If we succeed on that, this aircraft will be built in the U.S. This means another $500 million of investment and additional 2,000 jobs then.
Is there any capacity to perhaps ramp up that production if needed?
Yes, we are investing a lot, as I said, in the U.S. operation and the Brazilian operation to increase the capacity, to make more commercial jets, more business jets, and the KC-390 and Super Tucano for the next 5 years.
Talking about supply chain, it's been disrupted, and some are expecting that disruption to continue through 2026. Is there any clarity that could be a turning point soon?
Well, the supply chain, our supply chain is on average improving year after year, but we still have some bottlenecks, that some pacers that are holding us to make more aircraft and to deliver them on time. So now we have been working very closely to our supply chain. We have placed the teams of experts of Embraer very close to the key suppliers we have. We are helping the suppliers with we call rescue team, to help them to resolve quality issues, productivity issues. And we are using artificial intelligence to help us to assess the chain, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and also helping us with the inventory management and forecasting. So with that, we have been able to manage our supply chain and deliver almost what we want to do, but with some delays. But I expect this continuing to 2026, improving, but with some bottlenecks, and then improving further in 2027.
What kind of demand are you anticipating? Because we know that when it comes to your backlogs, it's at the highest level in 9 years.
Yes, we are growing. We are growing 2 digits every year, and we expect to
What
grow.
is that? 2 digits is 10 to 99.
Well, 2 digits is more than 10%, right? We are growing more than that from last year to this year. We expect to continue growing to next year, and then we see a more stable growth in the following years, which will be good for us and for the suppliers to stabilize, the supply chain. But we have ambitious plans to increase the production for the next years.
Embraer CEO Francisco Gomes Neto, and this is Bloomberg.